Instructor decides their fate in midair. Distressing content by Mrballen. What's good? How your day going? Your morning, evening, night, whenever you're watching this video. Unfortunately, you know I overanalyze everything. I do feel like I understand where this video is going. Looking at the thumbnail, I do see 2 parachutes. The word there is in there. The biggest giveaway though, which does suck, I've definitely seen about 3, maybe about 4 or 5, even more thumbnails that had ish in it like he's a hero or that's a real hero or this person's a hero, XYZ, along those lines, whatever, right? So I'm like, yeah, I take it. Someone's gonna sacrifice himself to save the other one. Who knows? I can get to the end, could be completely wrong. I'll take that in this situation. Yo, if you want to check out the original video, link will be in the description below, but let's go. I'm guilty of it too, though. I ain't gonna lie. I don't think mine that blatant, though. I hope not.
Today's story is a skydiving disaster story. However, it does not go the way you think it will. And at the end of today's video, there is a very special call to action that is connected to the main story that I think many of you will be very excited to participate in. But no pressure. However, before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please sneak in to the like button's house and swap out their cat for an identical looking cat. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into
Mute up,
today's story.
copyright. The maneuver.
On the morning of August 1st, 2009, 44-year-old skydiving instructor David Hartsock pulled into the parking lot of Skydive Houston in Texas and then made his way inside. A few minutes later, and Dave, like the rest of his colleagues, was hard at work getting ready for the day before the facility opened up and the inevitable weekend rush began. Skydive Houston is actually just a private airport, and it's not really in Houston. It's located about 30 miles to the northwest of Houston in a city called Waller. The main facility of Skydive Houston is situated right up against this huge open airfield that basically looks like a big green grass field. And the main facility itself is comprised of several large buildings, one of which is a huge hangar that contains the Super Twin Otter airplanes, which are the little aircraft that bring the skydivers up so they can jump out. Because Skydive Houston offers something called tandem jumping, it gets a lot of first-time jumpers. Tandem jumping is when a skydiving student attaches to the front of their instructor. Literally, they're buckled onto them, and then the two of them leap out of the plane together, with the student never detaching from the instructor. This method allows the student to just kind of go along for the ride and have no responsibility.
I wish I had the guts to do it. It looks so fun to me. My partner trying to get me to do it. He do it like once a year.
This method allows the student to just kind of go along for the ride and have no responsibility, while the instructor who's attached to them does everything. They make sure they're both stable in the air, they're the ones that pull the ripcord to deploy the chute, they're the ones that land them safely on the ground. And so obviously, tandem jumping really appeals to first-time jumpers. Dave had finished his 3-year-long training course to become a certified skydiving instructor just a few months earlier. But even prior to going through this course, Dave was already a very experienced skydiver with over 800 jumps to his credit. And the reason he had so many jumps is because Dave loved skydiving. It had given his life a focus that really nothing else ever had. Dave had always been a kind of average guy. He lived in a very modest house in a suburb of Houston, and for much of his life, he had worked very normal blue-collar jobs, like he had been a cook at 2 different chain restaurants, he had managed a grocery store, and he also had worked at a soda bottling plant. Dave was divorced and had no kids, but he had a really good group of friends who liked to go to bars and go bowling and play darts. And while Dave was never really unhappy with the way his life was going, as he started to creep into his 40s, he couldn't help but think, I haven't really done anything big or important in my life. And so in 2004, not long after Dave got divorced,
the life cycle is so vicious. If you legit just stand back and watch it, as you get older, you will. When I was that age, I was the same way, buddy boy. Woo! that bitch get deadly.
He couldn't
It's
help
dope,
but
though.
think, I haven't really done anything big or important in my life. And so, in 2004, not long after Dave got divorced, one of his good friends asked him if he wanted to go skydiving with him to celebrate that friend's 40th birthday. And Dave immediately thought to himself, this is it. This is a chance to do something big with my life. And so he told the friend, yes, I'd love to go. And after that first jump that Dave did with his friend, Dave was hooked. Whenever Dave was falling through the sky at over 100 miles per hour, it was like nothing else in the whole world even existed. Life became very simple and beautiful. The manager at Skydive Houston saw Dave come in every weekend for years to do all these jumps, and finally he just offered Dave a job. And so that was how Dave left the soda bottling plant to become a skydiving instructor. So, August 1st, 2009 was a Saturday, and Saturdays at Skydive Houston were incredibly busy with basically non-stop tandem jumps all day. Whenever Dave was not working, so he was jumping on his own, he would always pack his own parachute because, like many other skydivers, he liked to make sure it was done exactly right. But when Dave was working,
man.
especially on Saturdays when it was so crazy busy,
Doing everything correct, huh? Found something he loved.
but when
I'm
Dave
following
was
the rules,
working,
universe.
especially on Saturdays, when
I'm
it was
being
so
happy. I thought that was the goal, right? Do what makes you happy. I'm saying respect nature, right? I don't know where this is going. I could be wrong.
Right.
Let's see, man.
But when Dave was working, especially on Saturdays when it was so crazy busy, he didn't have time to pack and repack his parachute after every single jump because he was constantly being sent up again and again and again to take another student. And so instead, he would take one of the pre-packed parachutes that were left out for instructors inside of their clubhouse. That particular Saturday in August of 2009 went very quickly, with Dave going up one after another with different students and jumping out and pulling the chute and landing safely over and over again. And then finally, at the end of the day, right around 4 o'clock, when Dave was getting ready to be done for the day, his manager came up to him and said, hey, do you mind doing one more tandem jump? And even though Dave was really exhausted, he's dripping sweat, it's super hot outside, he'd done 6 jumps that day, which was a lot, he said, no problem.
Oh, why is
Well, it's that time of the year again,
play
which
out
means
like that,
the big
man?
game is right around the corner.
I'm gonna leave the links in
Again,
my
that's promo
description
code
also as
Mrballen only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Okay, back to the story. And so the manager introduced Dave to a short blonde woman who was visibly nervous named Shirley Diggert, who was there to celebrate her 54th birthday by skydiving for the first time. Her husband, her son, and her 3 grandkids were also there to watch her from the ground and take pictures, and her other son, who was celebrating his 30th birthday, he too was going skydiving. As soon as Dave walked up to Shirley, he grinned and stuck out his hand, and he made the same kind of corny joke he always made with nervous first-time jumpers, and that was, don't worry, you're going to be just fine, you're going to be strapped to me, and I'm not about to let anything happen to myself. And so Shirley laughed, and she did seem like she was a little bit at ease, and so Dave patted her on the shoulder, and then he walked over and he grabbed one of the pre-packed parachutes off the wall. These chutes actually contained 2 parachutes inside of the backpack. There was the main chute, which typically is the only chute that gets deployed on a jump, and then there was the reserve chute, which is a little bit smaller and is not normally used unless there's some sort of emergency where the main chute fails. After every jump, because the main chute has been deployed, it gets repacked and stuffed back into the backpack. But the reserve chute, because it almost never gets deployed, just stays packed. And so Skydive Houston, like basically every other skydiving facility, has certified technicians come in periodically to test the reserve chutes inside of the bag to make sure they're still packed exactly right. After grabbing the pre-packed parachute off the wall, Dave walked back over to Shirley, who was now in the staging area putting on her flight suit. A flight suit is a single garment. It kind of looks like a big onesie for an adult. And so Dave walked over, he put the parachute down, he tugged and pulled on her flight suit to make sure it was good, and then after he was satisfied, he picked the parachute back up and he signaled to Shirley, as well as Shirley's son, who was also skydiving, to follow him. And so the trio, they left the staging area, they went outside right to the airfield where there was a Super Twin Otter idling and other jumpers were climbing on board to go for a jump. And so Dave, Shirley, and Shirley's son got in line, they boarded the plane, and a few minutes later, they were airborne. As the plane slowly climbed up to 13,500 feet, which is the jumping altitude, Shirley was sitting directly in front of Dave. They were on a bench seat on the back right of this little airplane, and Dave made a point of talking to Shirley and asking her where she was from and what she did to kind of ease her nerves. Shirley would tell Dave that this was not the kind of thing that she typically did. In fact, she told Dave that her other son, who
nervous, man. She's not hearing none of those questions. Get it, understand it. Oh, she's fighting that fear though. I got my own set of questions. That's it. I get it. Nervous as hell. And I'm glad he's definitely trying to calm her down.
Not the kind of thing that she typically did. In fact, she told Dave that her other son, who was jumping with them, when he first decided he wanted to try skydiving a year earlier, she had desperately tried to talk him out of it, saying it was too dangerous. But recently, Shirley and her husband had decided that they needed to be more adventurous. They lived in a quiet town in rural Texas where Shirley was a mail carrier and her husband worked in a mine, and their lives were just kind of simple and very routine-oriented and kind of boring. So when Shirley's son, who was skydiving with them that day, had asked Shirley to go skydiving on her 54th birthday, she saw it as an opportunity to break the mold and do something adventurous, and so she said yes. And so Dave told Shirley about how he had discovered skydiving much the same way she had, and they really bonded over that. About 20 minutes after takeoff, all the tandem jumpers on the plane were now attached to their instructors, so Shirley was now buckled onto Dave. And then when they reached 13,500 feet, the jumping altitude, one of the instructors slid open the side door. It was time to jump. And the first one who was jumping was Shirley's son. And so from all the way back in the plane, Shirley called out to her son, "Have a good jump, I'll see you on the ground," as her son kind of waddled to the edge of the door with his instructor, and the two of them jumped out and disappeared into the air below. Next up was Shirley. So Dave told Shirley very calmly to stand up, and so they did. They stood up right next to their bench, and then before they waddled towards the exit, Dave, for what felt like the millionth time, checked to make sure he really was securely fastened onto Shirley, and then Dave tapped his ripcord right behind him, kind of like muscle memory, reminding himself where to go. He tapped his knife on his shoulder. He kind of just felt his equipment, and then feeling ready, he said, "Okay, Shirley, let's go." And then the two of them kind of waddled their way towards the front of the plane where that door was slid wide open, and then they turned, so Shirley's feet were right on the edge, basically looking out into the sky right outside. And so it's really loud, it's very windy.
We still got a shit ton of story left, dude. I can't take this age. Don't get me wrong, I'm not 40 yet. I'm not even approaching 40 yet. But reality kicks in when that 30 range come. I'm not gonna lie to you, dog. It starts to. Let me say, it starts to, man. Not everybody's life gonna go this path. Many of us just gonna live and do nothing and die. Many of us are gonna wanna do other ish. Many of us are gonna get bored inside this body. I mean, we're gonna be stuck in it. We're gonna be on like, what, year 40? Still got a brain in it that we don't know 100% how to control. Don't know what's going on. I ain't about to go that route. I'm stuck in it. I've been stuck in this body forever with no manual. I'm bored in it. I need something new, man. I've been told I can't do this all my life. I want to do this. What the fuck? Let's go. Let's get back to the video. That's a view, man. That's what tripped me out. I wasn't trying to overreact, man. When I saw that, even though it doesn't say real photo, when I just saw those clouds, dude, I was like, yo, legit. Only time I ever see that is if I'm in an airplane. And right now, this person, she's not in an airplane right now, dude. Looking down. And I think I know where this is going. You're telling me the one time, we're going to talk at the end. The one time I decide to say, I'm going to go ahead and use a little pre-packed one. Now I'm going to get effed over. It's like the...
where that door was slid wide open, and then they turned, so Shirley's feet were right on the edge, basically looking out into the sky right outside. And so it's really loud, it's very windy, and Dave is right in Shirley's ear saying, okay, I'm gonna count to 3 and we're gonna jump. And then Dave reached forward, he pulled Shirley's head back so she was looking up because he didn't want her to look down when they leapt out, sense. Because for some people that will cause them to panic when they see the ground. And so with Shirley's head back, Dave very calmly said 1, 2, 3, and then very gracefully, the two of them jumped out. From the moment you jump out of a plane at 13,500 feet until you touch the ground, it takes maybe 2 to 3 minutes with about 30 seconds to a minute of actual free fall. But that 2 to 3 minutes is so intense, it feels like it's 20 minutes long. And this was what Dave loved so much about skydiving, that intense presence you feel, that you're really in the moment. There's nothing else you can think about. It's just you careening through the sky towards the earth. It's incredible. Dave had actually had a number of close calls in his life. Like a few years earlier, he had been riding his motorcycle when somebody hit him in their car and he fractured his skull. And then not long after that accident, he was in another accident where he fractured his spine. And after each of those 2 accidents and a few others, the only thought in Dave's mind was, oh my goodness, I hope I can skydive again. And miraculously, he had been. He had made full recoveries and he was back to skydiving each time. And so now, whenever he jumped out of a plane, he just felt so lucky. The plan for that evening's jump was for Dave to rotate them 360 degrees 3 separate times so Shirley could get a full look down across Houston and all over Texas and just kind of see the world around her from so high up in the air. And then, whenever Dave noticed that they were at 5,000 feet using his wrist altimeter, which is basically like a watch that tells you how far you are from the ground, Dave would pull the ripcord, the main chute would deploy, and they would float gently down to the ground. And at first, that is how this jump went. After they exited the plane, they stabilized in the proper horizontal position with Shirley in front, her stomach pointing toward the ground, and Dave obviously right behind her, controlling the skydive. And then after a few seconds, Dave slightly changed his body position and began rotating them 360 degrees so Shirley could look down and see all the highways and cars and barns and houses and the city off in the distance. I mean, it's this spectacular view. And as you're falling through the sky, especially in the first few seconds of a jump, you can't tell that you're going super fast, but you're going over 120 miles an hour, which is called terminal velocity. It's literally the fastest you can fall in the air. And so you're blazing towards the ground, but it almost feels like the air is pushing you back up. And so Shirley's having this incredible first-time experience, just really taking it all in. And Dave, even though he had done this hundreds of times, was having a wonderful time as well. But Dave really was just focused on his altimeter because when they hit 5,000 feet, he needed to pull the parachute. And so they're cruising along, Dave's checking his altimeter over and over again, and then finally he sees 5,000 feet, he quickly looks around him to scan for any other jumpers, he's clear, and so he reached back and he pulled his ripcord handle for his main chute. Now, normally, when you deploy your main parachute, depending on what kind of parachute you're using, there's actually kind of a slow unfurling. It's not like suddenly the chute is deployed and then you just stop. That would not.
Movies lie to me. I always thought it was like on some Batman shit. I'm gonna do this shit one day. I hope my partner keep asking me. I hope he don't give up. And
looks around him to scan for any other jumpers, he's clear, and so he reached back and he pulled his ripcord handle for his main chute. Now, normally, when you deploy your main parachute, depending on what kind of parachute you're using, there's actually kind of a slow unfurling. It's not like suddenly the chute is deployed and then you just stop. That would not work. You'd get destroyed every time you skydive. So the way it's packed is it kind of unfurls slowly, and it's like a gradual slowing down. But after Dave has pulled the ripcord handle, there was an immediate yank of the parachute backpack up and away from him, and then from somewhere above him, he heard a loud popping sound. Now, Dave had jumped enough times to know that this was not normal. There was a problem. and he would be right. The main parachute had deployed out of the backpack, but it got tangled on the way out, and so it did not inflate at all, and so as a result, it was not slowing them down at all. But worse than that was this tangled up parachute was still attached to them, and it kind of became like a sail, and it turned Dave and Shirley onto their sides and began whipping them around in something called a death spiral, where literally you're just spinning so unbelievably fast that normally jumpers will actually lose consciousness. They're spinning so fast. But Dave, being a very experienced skydiver, he tried to stay calm. He tried to track his way out of this death spiral, which is when you put your arms and legs straight and try to go in a straight line through the air. But it didn't work. He just kept on spinning faster and faster. And at this point, Shirley, she's practically losing consciousness.
I can already hear it. He is a hero. I can already hear it
going on. And Dave is just trying to stay calm. He's still trying to get out of it, but he knows there's no way. But Dave remembers he has 2 knives. And so he decides he's going to cut away this tangled main chute and then deploy his reserve chute, because you don't want to open your reserve directly into a tangled parachute. And so he reaches up, he's spinning, remember, he reaches up and he grabs the first knife.
Yes.
However, the lines of the tangled parachute had actually tangled on his shoulder strap where that first knife was. And so he literally couldn't get to the knife. And so now they're below 5,000 feet. They're at like 4,000, closing in on 3,000 feet. I mean, they're coming close to the ground here, and they don't have a canopy. But Dave, he stays calm. They're spinning around. He can't get that first knife, and so he reaches for the second knife, which was placed in front of Shirley. But because of how quickly they were spinning, he couldn't quite get his arm out to grab the second knife. It was just impossible to grab it. And so without any other options, Dave had to pull his reserve chute, knowing it was going to go straight into this tangled mess right above them. And so the reserve chute, it deploys, and it does work, at least at first. There's that gradual slowing down sensation that Dave immediately feels. Their spin begins to stop, and for a second, it seems like they're going to be saved by this reserve chute, because by now, they're only about 2,000 feet from the ground.
Save them both.
However, the worst case scenario happens to Dave and Shirley. As soon as their reserve chute was up over their head, inflated, their main chute suddenly caught air and inflated as well. So they had 2 parachutes. Now, you can land with 2 parachutes, absolutely. However,
stop, man. You're just telling me decisions, these little decisions are having these dramatic ass effects, man. You cannot tell me when he grabbed that parachute, this does not feel like those situations where you help someone over and over and over and over and over, and you finally tell them no one time, and they turn it back on you and treat you like you're a piece of shit, whatever. That's what it felt like. Now you're telling me, I don't know if the reserve one coming out did something to probably help make the primary one come out, whatever, or if it was just like, you're telling me if I would have just waited this amount of time, it would have eventually just caught itself. Get the fuck out of here.
Parachutes. Now, you can land with 2 parachutes, absolutely. However, sometimes in a worst case scenario, the 2 parachutes will catch wind going in opposite directions. So basically the parachutes will go out to either side of the jumper or jumpers if it's tandem, and then you basically have wings that aim the jumpers straight at the ground. It's like an accelerant. It causes them to literally speed up straight towards the ground. And once you start moving in this position, which is known as a down plane, it's almost impossible to get out of it, because the faster you go, the more inflated these 2 parachutes become. And so Dave knows they are less than 2,000 feet from the ground. They're in a down plane, which is almost always fatal. And so all he can do is try to get out of the down plane. And so Dave, with all his might, he begins yanking on the different lines of both parachutes, and he manages to get them out of the down plane, which is nearly impossible to do. He does it. And then both parachutes collapse. And suddenly, Dave and Shirley have no parachute, they're less than 1,000 feet from the ground, and they are falling once again over 100 miles per hour straight down to the earth.
Ooh, boy. Life is crazy.
Get them out of the down plane, which is nearly impossible to do. He does it. And then both parachutes collapse. And suddenly, Dave and Shirley have no parachute, they're less than 1,000 feet from the ground, and they are falling once again over 100 miles per hour straight down to the earth. Now, at this moment, Shirley is crying, she's screaming, she doesn't know what's going on, and Dave has this incredible sense of calm come over him. Years ago, Dave had given up on the idea of ever having a family or of having kids. He was a really good guy who would have been a great father, but it just wasn't in the cards for him. Instead, Dave had found skydiving. Oftentimes, Dave would stay late at Skydive Houston and just sit around the campfire with the other instructors and the other jumpers and drink beers and eat burgers and tell stories. And sometimes Dave would even sleep the night at Skydive Houston because he didn't want to go back home to his empty 3-bedroom house where all he wanted to do when he was there was go skydiving again. But now, literally staring down his own death, knowing that it's going to happen any second, the only thing he could think about was Shirley. He didn't care if he died. He felt like he had found his calling. If he died doing it, so be it. But Shirley, her husband, her son on the ground, her son skydiving, her 3 grandkids, they're gonna see Shirley hit the ground and die. He just couldn't handle it. He thought, I have to do something to protect Shirley. And with only a few hundred feet to the ground, Dave yelled to Shirley, tuck your knees up. And Shirley immediately did it. She threw her knees up. And as she did, Dave pulled back as hard as he possibly could on the risers and the toggles in an attempt to switch places with Shirley. Shirley was in front of him. Her body's going to hit the ground first. Dave flipped them around so that his back was going to hit the ground first. He was going...
I'm editing this out. Oh, fucking camera, dog. Ugliest fucking cry I've ever heard in my life, dog. I'm out. Boy, fuck you, man.